Today we're going to look at a lot of the different palos. Palo literally just means stick or branch of a tree, and these are the various forms in flamenco. And a lot of them are related to one another, so we're going to talk about those relationships, and we're going to kind of do a pretty quick rundown of most of the really important basic ones. There are hundreds. Once you get into the regional styles and the fandangos and all these other ones, there's a lot to learn, but most of the flamenco you see is really a few, maybe a dozen or 2 dozen basic palos. We're going to talk about the really important ones, the ones you're going to hear a lot and that you need to understand. I talk sometimes about these continuums or continua, and there's just a couple of them. But one of them, and probably the most important, is Solea to Soleá por Buleria to Buleria. So Solea is a slow 12 beat that we talk about a lot in the compás lesson and obviously in the Solea lessons. Soleá por Buleria is sort of a faster, I call it a mid-tempo version of Solea. On paper, it's exactly the same accents, but Soleá por Buleria starts to sound like maybe it starts on 12 half the time. And then as you speed it up, again, on paper, it's the same thing, but it gets a completely different groove and it turns into Buleria, which is a very fast, the fastest 12 beat thing we have. The other weird thing that happens is that generally, more often than not, Solea is played por arriba, which is in this key, E Phrygian. Soleá por Buleria and Buleria, more often than not, are played por medio, also known as por fiesta when you're in Buleria. But you can play any of these things in either of the keys. So if we stick to E Phrygian just to look at how the rhythm changes, our basic Solea compás, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 1, 2, 3. If I speed it up, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12. Solea por Buleria, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12. That's Solea por Buleria tempo. It can be a little slower, a little faster than that. And if we get even faster, 10, 11, 12, 3, 6, 8, 10, 12, 3, 6, 8. Now we're in Buleria. And there's some specific ways we play Buleria when we're in this key, like this, which you may recognize from Solea. That's something that we do, but we change in different places when we're playing it in Buleria. So again, Solea, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12. Solea por Buleria is more 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12. 3, 4, 5, 6. And Buleria, 12. I could do the same thing por medio, and now the Solea is the thing that is more often than not played in this key. We generally don't play Solea por medio, but it definitely does happen. It's just much less common. So that would be, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12. Solea por Buleria, 1, 2, 3. This is more common. 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12. 12-beat compasses end in a buleria. And what I mean by that is if you speed them up, and this happens most often in the dance, you end up in a buleria, and it really doesn't matter what key you're in or what palo you're in. So if I'm in a Soleá por Buleria here, it kind of makes perfect sense that I would end in buleria. I would go, I'm here. This feels like a natural progression. But if I'm in an alegría, which is a major key thing, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. Towards the end of the alegría, the dancer is going to bring up the tempo, and we're going to get. Even a guajira, which is kind of a different feeling, 12, 12, 3, 6, 8, 10, 12, 12. it's still a buleria, but it's related to the guajira. So we call that the macho. The macho is the change that comes at the end of a piece. Sometimes it's just a change of key. If you're in Soleá, you're here, and at the end of the piece, it might go major for a second, which is kind of funky the first time you hear it. This is something to look out for. A lot of things, especially in the dance form, will speed up and turn into a buleria at the end. That relationship also happens in Tientos, Tangos, Rumba. This is another one of these, another continuum. We start with the slowest, which is, they're all 4/4 on paper, they're all the same, but they feel very different. So Tientos is 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, and 4, and 1, 2, 1, 3, and 4, 1, 2, 3, and Tangos, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, and 2, 3, and 4. And tango can be fast. Faster and a slightly different groove, also in 4, is rumba. Or you've seen the Gypsy Kings. That kind of rumbero thing. But these are all related to one another. So a tientos that a singer sings might end in a tangos. A tangos might end in a rumba. A rumba has nowhere to go except faster rumba. Alegrias is part of what's called the cantinas family. So there's a lot of things that sound like alegrias. So I would say at first, just learn alegrias. And then as you hear things that sound to your ear exactly like an alegría, but it has a different name, like a cantina or something, don't sweat it too much to sort of learn that that's part of the Alegría family. You can hear it. And this is a 12-beat compás, on paper exactly the same as Soleá, Soleá por Buleria, and Buleria. And the groove, in fact, is identical to Soleá por Buleria. In other words, the palmas, the way it feels, the way you can start on 1 or on 12, are all exactly the same for Alegrías and Soleá por Buleria. The right hand really doesn't change. It's just the left hand, which is very different, because here we're in a major key. So whereas in Soleá por Buleria, we're doing 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. In Alegrías, we're doing 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12. And again, it can start on 12 or 1. These mid-tempo ones really can go back and forth. So I could have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12. 3. That kind of felt like the 12. 10, 11, 12. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12. Right? Same groove as Soleá por Buleria. Very different left hand. And I should mention that Alegrias can really be played in any key. It's major, so you can play it in A. It's also commonly played in C. These are probably the 3 most common. You'll often hear people refer to the key of C as cantinas, because traditionally that was the key that you played in for cantinas. But really, these very specific things, when you hear the name of something and you're like, that sounds exactly like an alegría, but it's got a different name. And the reason it sounds exactly the same is because the guitar sounds the same to you. More often than not, what makes one thing a variation and have a different name is not what the guitarist is doing, but what the singer is doing. The letra that a singer sings for a cantina is slightly different than the letra that a singer sings for an alegría. As the accompanist, you have to know when to play which chord. But other than that, the falsetas and the compás you keep in between are really basically the same thing. We're not supposed to say these things out loud, but it's really true. It's very useful to know the difference between a cantina and an alegría, because that sort of prepares you for what's going to come with the singer. But a lot of these distinctions are less meaningful to us as guitarists in terms of learning how to play the guitar. So we still have to know the same kind of repertoire, we just have to approach the accompaniment a little bit differently. The Seguirilla is also a 12 beat. I talk in the Palmas videos a little bit about the fact that the hardest thing about the Seguirilla is really figuring out how to count it. And while there's a lot of ways out there, some of which are really clever and seem really helpful, the most common one in Spain and among people who do flamenco is a little weird. It's 1 and 2 and 3 and a 4 and a 5. 1, 2, 3 and a 4, 5. In no sane world does it make sense to say 1 and 2 and 3 and a 4, right? The time between beat 1 and 2 and beat 2 and 3 should be exactly the same as the time between beat 3 and 4, but it's not. This is simply how it's done. I can't really defend it except to say it's what I do and it's what pretty much everyone I know does, so you kind of have to learn how to count it this way. If you think about taking the first half of the Soleá and the second half of Soleá, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, and just flipping them, and this is where all these clever ways of counting Seguidilla come from. If you think of it that way, then you'd have 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Well, that makes perfect sense, except that no one in the right mind starts a measure on beat 7. And the other, really, the more important reason not to use it is that no one uses it. It may be helpful to understand it, but you really, to speak the language of flamenco, you really want to think of it in terms of 1 and 2 and 3 and 4, 5. And again, like so many other things, the macho of the Seguidilla is a sort of Buleria. And again, it's like a backwards flipped Buleria. So whereas Buleria is 12, 3, 6, 8, 10, when you're in a Seguidilla, 1, 2, 3, and a 4, and a 5. It's kind of just a backwards Buleria. Guajira is a different kind of 12. It's another major key palo, and it really does start on 12 much more often than 1. And matter of fact, off the top of my head, I can't think of it really ever starting on 1. The basic compás is 12, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 3, 6, 8, 10, 12, 3, 6, 8, 10, 12, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. Right? So it's another 12, but it feels it's got its own groove, and it's got this major key thing, and also this melody. Is very distinctive. The Farruca is another palo which is not quite as popular as it used to be. It's a minor key one, and it's in 4/4. That's your basic Farruca. Now, if you know anything about jazz or classical harmony, you'll realize that that note should not have been there by any Western analysis. Since we're going to a minor, it should be flat 13 and not natural 13. And so I actually like the way this sounds better. It's just what my ears used to. But I play both, and this is very common. If you listen to old Farrucas, you'll hear all over the place. So deal with it. Another major key one, but in 4/4, is the Colombiana. So it's sort of like the 4/4 version of the Guajira, or it's just another 4/4 thing that happens to be in a major key. So you have 1, 2, 3, 4. Also very closely related to the tiento, which is this slow 4/4, is the taranto. The taranta and the taranto are both in the same key. The difference is that taranta is libre, which means there is no compás to it. You follow the singer, and if you're playing the guitar, you do whatever the hell you want. The taranto is very much feels like a tientos, And the macho of the Taranto is actually the tango in the same key. Fandango de Huelva is another one that's a little funky. Most of the Fandango family are actually libre, but some of them and some of the machos of these libre fandangos are in compás. And the Fandango de Huelva is in compás, and it's actually a sort of standalone, it's actually a standalone thing. It's not the macho of anything else. It just is. And the compás is, you could say it's in 12. I actually kind of think of it more in 6, although it generally phrases in 12s. So the basic compás is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, and 10, 11, 12. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11. See, it's that 9 and 11, which is one of the reasons I say it's not really a 12. It's not 1, 2, 3, 6, 8, 10, 12. It's this 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 1, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, however you want to count it. It's the same thing. And the distinctive thing in the Fandango de Huelva is this. Which is funky because if you're thinking about it in 12s, it starts on the 10. You get 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 7, 8, 9, and 10, 11, 12, 1, 2, 3. So watch out for those and really make sure you know where they start. There's some funky little things in the Fandango de Huelva, but it's a nice rhythm. That's not all of the palos in flamenco, but that's a lot of them to get you started. I will add more somewhere on the site so that there's a place where we can sort of keep track and keep updating more and more information about these palos.